This is the story of Bad King John, circa 1215. In 1215, most people believed in the divine right of kings, which stated that the king's power came from God. Consequently, if the king is a god on earth, then the king should not be questioned. And really, the kings and queens started thinking themselves as God, so they thought that they were infallible and no one should question them. Uh, King John was an English king. He was not a very pleasant person. He told lies. He put innocent people in prison so that he could steal their belongings. He put a poor man in prison once just so he could steal the man's horse and cart. There was a rumor that he murdered his nephew, but it was never proven. The King of France demanded to know where the boy was, the nephew. King John was a vassal of the King of France. That meant he had to answer, right? But he ignored the King of France. That's the way King John was. Promises never bothered King John. He would promise anything to anybody. Sure, especially if there was money in it for him. But he soon would break his word. When the Archbishop of Canterbury died, King John seized the monastery, banished, which means kicked out, all the monks, and kept the land and all the wealth for himself. This made the Archbishop furious. The Archbishop called all the nobles together and read the law of the land to them. He made sure they understand their rights under the law. Some could not read, and many did not know their rights. The nobles were amazed to discover that King John was breaking the law. They could do something about it. Nobles confronted King John. King John promised he would do better. He promised the nobles that he would not raise taxes again without discussing it first. After all, it was the law. What do we know about King John? Does he care about promises? No. What does that make him? A liar. Okay. Go ahead and make sure you've answered question 9. You can pause this video. When you're done pausing the video or answering 9, click unpause. Click just click play. All right. And actually answer 10 too. He promises not to raise the taxes without discussing it because that was the law. In truth, however, the law had as much value to King John as did his word. Back to the story. Weeks later, he raised taxes again and he consulted no one. He had 2 of his nobles arrested and he seized their land without allowing them to present any defense. The nobles were furious. Armed and ready, they gathered a huge force of nobles at a town called Runnymede. They brought the king there. The archbishop read aloud to the king from a parchment he held, a parchment called the Magna Carta, which literally means great letter, but it really means great charter. As the king listened, he became more and more angry. How dare his nobles treat him like this? How dare the archbishop read from a piece of paper and expect him to sign it? It was clear, even to a selfish King John, that if he did not sign, his nobles would desert him. Without an army behind him, some pretender would steal his throne. The king was furious about it, but he signs the Magna Carta anyway. Why? Well, all those nobles are his soldiers, and so if he doesn't do what they say, they could stop being his soldiers. In addition, he thought if he stalled, they would go tired of things and not really hold them to keeping the Magna Carta. But they did hold him to keeping the Magna Carta, so the document and its laws survive. The Magna Carta was a list of rights. Most of these rights were already law, common law, in England. The Magna Carta restated them so that there would be no confusion and no going back on them. The Magna Carta added new rights too. One of the new rights was that the nobles could keep watch over the king. They could seize his castle if he did not keep his words about the taxes. Some historians say that after signing the Magna Carta, King John went off in some home in a huff and screamed and rolled around on the floor like a madman. Perhaps he did, but it did not matter. From that day on, things changed in England forever. The king could no longer do whatever he wanted. He had to obey the law just like everyone else. If he did not, his nobles could seize his land and banish him from England. Therefore, the Magna Carta of 1215 is important because it means that nobody is above the law, including the king. Okay, now you should have answered questions 11 and 12. I'm going to go ahead and pause it. and that concludes the story on Bad King John.